think we get going. Beck, if you could advance to the next slide in just a moment. I just want to welcome everybody to the West Vine Basin Floodplain and Stormwater Master Plan Update public meeting. Next slide, Beck. My name's Pete Yango, Senior Community Engagement Specialist with Fort Collins Utilities. And I'm going to be moderating our session today, helping us stay on track with time, monitoring chat, monitoring the Q&A for any kind of questions that might come through. Here's our agenda. It's pretty simple. We're going to move through some introductory information briefly, talk a little bit about master planning and what it is. Then we're going to give some information about the floodplain updates that are proposed, and then move right quickly into the master plan updates that are proposed, which is where we'll spend most of our time. That should take 20 to 30 minutes, and then we have time for a Q&A as well as a little bit of discussion. Now on your screen right here, there's a little bit more information for you. Down bottom, there's some information. That's basically what your Zoom toolbar should look like. You have your audio options. You can click on that little caret to troubleshoot or change your audio. If you want to chat with panelists, you can go ahead and do that by clicking on the chat. You could connect with us directly. You can raise your hand, which will come in handy when we do the Q&A, because we are able to enable you to talk if writing the question in isn't exactly how you prefer to participate. And then also, as we move along throughout the presentation, you're welcome to submit questions to the Q&A. Now, when you submit questions to the Q&A, we're either going to hold tight, and we'll let you know that, and we'll answer the question once we get through the presentation and we have a hopefully robust discussion. Or if it is something that's going to be clarifying for the whole group, we might actually want to address it right away. And so you might see that happens. Okay, and the last thing on this page I want to share is the ourcity.fcgov.com/West-Vine. That is the place where we're collecting all of the information, feeding into the feedback analysis for this project. And so if you did want to share more beyond tonight, that's the place to do it. You can drop pins on maps and let us know where you've experienced flooding events, or you want to make comments otherwise. You could connect directly with Beck, who you're going to hear from here in just a moment, who's our project manager here. You can connect directly with him on that page, as well as Heidi and others. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back to you, Beck, so you can elaborate a little bit more on the master planning process.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So my name is Beck Anderson. I'm the project manager for the City of Fort Collins, and I've been working on the West Vine Basin master plan update here the past few years. And I'll go ahead and just introduce Craig Jacobson from Icon Engineering now. Is on the team, and Mark Wilcox with PHM Design, also been helping us out with the project. This has been done in collaboration with Larimer County, and then the numerous internal and external stakeholders. So I want to kind of start off here with explaining, for those of you who aren't familiar with the master planning process and what it is, kind of just explain the process we go through here. So the City of Fort Collins Master Planning Program was first established around the early 1980s in order to define and map flood hazards in the community and recommend solutions to address those hazards. So updates to those master plans occurred in the early 2000s, and the city is now currently working on updates to 3 of the basins within the city, with our goal of completing more updates in the coming years. So today, the main purpose of the program is basically to protect people, property, and the environment against flooding and erosion and water quality problems caused by stormwater runoff. So,
Beck, before you go any further, I just wanted to share some attendees are mentioning that you're a little hard to hear and understand, and so maybe take a moment if you are able to address that.
Let me try. Is it the fan on my computer maybe?
You could try a different microphone, or just like really speaking up if there is no other option for you.
Can you hear me better now?
It's just kind of like this scratchiness that we're getting as you talk.
Let me try. Is that better, Pete?
It's the same.
I don't know what's going on my end here.
Try to really project if you don't have another microphone option to try. And it might be as good as we get.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So, so each of the city's 13 basins have gone through the same process to develop the stormwater master plan. So we start off with the baseline hydrology, which determines peak runoff resulting from a series of rainfall events in the drainage basin. And then we move into step 2, which is basically we perform a hydraulic analysis to determine the flooding extents from the peak runoff determined in the baseline hydrology. And then floodplain mapping is also prepared as part of this step. So step 3, which we're going to kind of be focusing on a lot tonight, is to move into the selected plan, which identifies problems related to flooding, erosion, and water quality. And after those problems have been identified, an alternatives analysis is completed to evaluate potential solutions. So from the alternatives analysis, we then develop a conceptual design of the recommended plan of improvement. So we're going to be diving into that selected plan alternatives tonight. And then the fourth and final step of the master plan is to present to Water Board and to select basins such as West Vine, the Lamar County Board of County Commissioners for approval. And then eventually the master plan will be adopted by the Utilities Executive Director. So for West Vine, just to kind of highlight here, we completed the baseline hydrology in 2015. The draft hydraulics and floodplain was completed in 2017 through 2019, with the plan to adopt in late 2020. And then with the completion of the hydraulics and floodplain, we began the draft selected plan in 2020. And we anticipate adoption in late 2021, early 2022. So moving into the floodplain, I think the big question is why update the floodplain? So the current floodplain for West Vine was mapped almost 20 years ago. Since that time, we've had substantial improvements and significant advances in floodplain modeling software technology, as well as the topographic data which we use to develop the models and map floodplains. So this has allowed us to better identify and represent true flood risk in the basin. So by having these most up-to-date and accurate floodplain boundaries, we're better able to understand where the true problem areas exist. And then that helps us in developing appropriate solutions to address those issues. So I don't have time tonight to go into the floodplain in detail and look at all the areas that have changed, but I'm just going to share this website here at the top of the page. So if you go to this website and scroll down, there will be a tab that says 2017 through 2020 hydraulic and floodplain mapping update. And so if you click there, there's a tab to click that says view preliminary updated floodplain. And that'll take you to an FC Maps website that's created for the floodplain update. So on that website, you can navigate around, look at the floodplain changes between the current effective and the new proposed. And then you can also add comments if you want. So some examples of comments we've seen in the past relate to elevation certificates for properties within the basin, which allowed them to be mapped out of the previous or the current effective floodplain, but then maybe they're seeing their property mapped back in with the new floodplain. So we'll take a look at these on an individual basis. Some other comments may relate to just how the floodplain is mapped through your property. So please reach out if you have any questions. And then my last slide here is just kind of highlighting again the Our City page that Pete started out with there in the beginning. And then also contacts here for residents located within the City of Fort Collins limits. Heidi Hansen with our City of Fort Collins Floodplain Management. There's her number and email. And then residents located in Larimer County, please contact Devin. And if you have any issues or anything, just, you can reach out to me directly and I can help you get in touch with me. And I'll have my contact information here at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Craig and Mark.
Thank you, Beck. And let me know if any of the audio has any challenges on this end as well, and I can try to make some changes. That was a good introduction to this, and now we're going to continue gears and continue to talk about the stormwater master plan for the West Vine Basin. So just a quick introduction to the project. This project is sponsored by the City of Fort Collins along with the Larimer County as well. I'm with Icon Engineering, and Mark Wilcox is with DHM Design, and we're part of the design team developing this West Vine Basin master plan. Just to kind of get an update on where we are on the current schedule, the previous year was spent initiating the master plan as well as developing what we call an alternatives report. This alternatives report is available on the website that Beck and Pete have already referenced up to this point. So where we are right now is in the initial stages of our public process, for which we want to collect feedback on the alternatives that are presented as we move into what we call a selected plan development. So we've identified this time period between April 16th and June 26th to really share this information and solicit feedback through the website that was previously developed and city staff. So the West Vine Basin, if you can see it up here and see my cursor moving okay, this is one of 13 watershed basins within the City of Fort Collins. This just gives a proximity map to the city and the other neighboring drainage basins. We are working within the northwest quadrant of the city. This is a little bit more specifically where the West Vine Basin is and some of the features of the surrounding area. So just zooming in a little bit, you have CSU's Foothill campus on the very western side, just downstream of Horsetooth Reservoir. Soldier Creek is one of the more prominent features. In fact, this is one of the only open natural drainage ways within this system. And you can see with Soldier Creek, it does end in an irrigation canal known as the New Mercer Ditch. And there is no further connection directly to the Cache La Poudre River. This is a goal of the master plan study to be able to extend Soldier Creek in order to manage storm runoff throughout this watershed without the interception of the irrigation ditches for stormwater purposes. So speaking of the irrigation ditches, there are 3 major ditches, including the Pleasant Valley and Lake Canal, the New Mercer Ditch, and the Larimer County Canal number 2 that are located on the downstream end. The Arthur's Ditch is also located towards the northern eastern portion of this basin as well. Prominent features also within this basin include the Poudre School District campus and Poudre High School, Irish Elementary, Lincoln Middle School, and various other schools and facilities within this watershed. In general, the basin encompasses 3.5 square miles. 20% of the basin is currently within the City of Fort Collins. 80% is within Larimer County. However, when you look at future growth expansion of the city, 56% of this basin may ultimately be encumbered by the City of Fort Collins within their growth management areas. This basin is prone to flooding, and in the past there have been major flood events that have contributed to property and structure damage. Some of these were focused in on the early to late 1990s along Irish Drive, and these are just a listing of several other areas that have occurred and had flooding problems in the past. This had led to other improvements made by the city and county over time. In 1999, Larimer County initiated the Hollywood Irish Drainage Improvement Project, which added detention and stormwater infrastructure. The West Vine Outfall Channel was constructed in 2016 by the city of Fort Collins. This is on the downstream end of the project, closest to the Poudre River, north of Vine Drive. And then the city of Fort Collins also purchased 37 acres of land from Punta Verde Natural Area, and this was really purchased for the need of future stormwater improvements. So these next two maps just depict some of the flood hazards Beck was referencing as part of the recent floodplain updates. The blue areas, the teal areas, reference what we consider a 100-year floodplain boundary, with cross-hatching areas representative of what we consider to be a floodway area. This is a part of the 100-year floodplain, more subjected to higher flows and velocity and higher flood risk. The orange areas are also considered part of the 100-year floodplain, but a moderate risk floodplain. This just depicts the orientation of this floodplain with respect to the layouts of the West Vine Basin and infrastructure and buildings within this basin. It's just used to help us gauge problem identification as we're looking at stormwater mitigation needs within this master plan. So that brings us to our master plan goals. And what are we trying to achieve with this master plan? Well, we want to achieve projects that will help reduce flood risk within this watershed. But with that comes the ability to enhance and restore riparian habitats and make water quality improvements. Development does occur within this basin, so we want this stormwater master plan to serve as guidance for development in terms of best managing stormwater. Also looking at locations where preservation may be recommended for areas of floodplain preservation or recreation, as well as areas needed for acquisition as part of implementing projects into the future. These goals are often collaborative. We often work with natural areas, open spaces, and parks to gauge parks, recreation, other needs that can go along with future capital stormwater improvement projects. And as I mentioned, one of the specific goals for this particular drainage basin deals with the irrigation ditches and how to best manage stormwater around the irrigation ditches so the irrigation ditches aren't serving as a means of stormwater conveyance. Those are for those reasons. So I'm going to pass this on to Mark Wilcox a little bit to talk about our collaboration we've done as part of development of this project.
Great, thanks, Craig. So as part of our work, we met early on in 2020 with a charrette format with different departments within the city of Fort Collins as well as within the county. Part of the goal was to kind of identify who the stakeholders were that might be either directly affected by any of the improvements that we're starting to talk about for projects, those that might be indirectly affected and potentially affected or had an interest. We wanted to work with the city and county departments to talk more about what they understood that these stakeholders' perceived needs were, so we could start identifying goals and aligning opportunities with the city and county goals and the stakeholder goals. It's also used as an opportunity to share data, create project goals, talk through solutions for any of the perceived issues that were identified. We also targeted certain stakeholders, as you see with CSU and the Foothills campus, the Poudre School District, different private groups, development groups, irrigation companies, as well as others. We worked through some early prioritization and vision goals to balance those needs against the various departments' needs within the city and the county. Let's go to the next slide. As you see here, there's a series of sticky notes that were used as part of the charrette that we collected to identify these different affected interests. And there's site-specific stormwater needs. Let's go one more slide. And then before we move on, some of the main themes that we've identified through collaboration were flood risk, flood mitigation, water quality enhancement, natural resource management, stormwater management, infrastructure enhancement, parks, trails, open space, and recreation. And from all this information, we were able to schedule and hold these discussions with the key stakeholders throughout the process into 2020, and to really understand their goals and how to align those with the project's goals. And Craig, do you want to go
Mark.
through the alternatives?
Yeah, so I will go back now. I'll start talking about some of the specific alternatives that we are considering as part of this, study. And generally, as we developed our alternatives, in order to present them, we broke them into corridors, and we'll talk about these a little bit more specifically, but we have the southwest corridor, the northwest corridor, and the central corridor. And I think within our slides, we generally start northwest, southwest, and then move on to the central corridor as well. I think I might have said that backwards, but maybe not. So we're going to begin with the northwest corridor and kind of talk through some of the projects here. And this just provides an overview of the areas that we're generally discussing. So we have LaPorte Avenue. That's kind of towards the bottom of the page. Taft Hill Road is over here on the eastern side, and Overland Trail. And these projects essentially start with how to manage water from the Pleasant Valley and Lake Canal. So the first alternative proposes some stormwater management in order to divert excess water beyond the required irrigation flows that may enter the canal and upstream areas into a regional detention pond that we refer to as the Northwest Regional Detention Pond. The purpose of this detention pond, which is located just to the north of LaPorte Avenue here, real close to LaPorte and Overland Trail, is to manage stormwater runoff in order to detain it into levels that the resulting flows will fit within the current infrastructure that's part of that existing Hollywood Irish stormwater improvements. The detention pond is approximately 30 acre feet in size and will drain essentially to the existing Hollywood Irish detention pond that's located further to the east. This pond here is located just to the east of Sunset Street. So in addition to the Northwest Hollywood Irish Pond, as we refer to it, there's also a series of stormwater pipes that are proposed to increase drainage in Overland and LaPorte Avenue. This will bring water additionally to this pond and reduce some of the flooding potential that may occur within the neighborhoods that are to the downstream of Overland Trail. Similarly, there will be areas where additional stormwater will be collected in combinations of overland swales and stormwater pipes to reduce the amount of flooding that could occur on properties along LaPorte Avenue and also in area Sunset Street, and be able to convey that water again to the existing Hollywood Irish detention pond. At the Hollywood Irish detention pond, what is being proposed there with this added detention upstream would be a series of water quality improvements. So it would be making use of the capacity that's currently in the existing detention pond as it currently exists, which is approximately 17 acre feet, and adding water quality in the form of riparian enhancements and control structures on stormwater infrastructure in order to treat water quality and improve the water quality before it enters the major drainage ways further downstream. In addition to these central improvements within the Northwest corridor, there's other improvements that have been identified, such as up at this is called the Kestrel Farms Natural Area. This is just upstream of the Shirley Heights and Liberty Meadows subdivision as well. Currently, stormwater continues in these flow passes and enters into the neighborhood, and the neighborhood has a very minor storm sewer system to it. So this improvement would propose to combine some additional detention in with the natural areas and outfall that detention through a series of stormwater pipes and infrastructure, making its way further downstream into more of the central corridors of this stormwater study. Moving on from the Northwest corridor is the Southwest corridor. And key features within the Southwest corridor are our work in collaboration with CSU's Foothills campus as well as improvements to Soldier Canyon Creek itself. This will also be conveyed through the Poudre School District campus at the same time. So key features here are, again, managing stormwater runoff. That may be in excess of the Pleasant Valley and Lake Canal's capacity through a series of regional detention ponds. In this case, this is a very significant pond on the order of 65 acre feet that manages a significant flow of water that has the potential to reach it. The detention pond reduces the flow leaving the pond such that floodplains can be reduced along the Soldier Canyon Creek corridor, as well as the risk for overtopping of Overland Trail is also made as well. Overland Trail is proposed to have an additional culvert added to it, along with downstream of Overland Trail and downstream of the fish farm that currently exists there would be, we refer to it as more of a restored conveyance corridor for Soldier Canyon Creek. This would consist of an approximate 50-foot wide buffer of land to be used for a combination of channel improvements, stream restoration, and water quality type infrastructure. Recognizing there's also additional properties located on both sides of the creek, we'd anticipate additional culverts will be needed in order to keep those accesses and improve those accesses so there's a reduced risk of flooding for those property owners at the same time. And I'm sorry, I should have gone to the blow up. That probably would have made this look a little better. Whoops. There we go. So this is the Foothills Campus Pond, Overland Trail, the restored corridor here for Soldier Canyon Creek, and then finally is the Poudre School District Administrative Campus. Now, the administrative campus brings its own sets of challenges just in terms of public access and other needs that the campus has as well. And so through this corridor, the same system as flow is proposed to be managed through a system of culvert improvements. We went through a brainstorming activity with the school district to determine what type of stormwater improvement fits both the needs of the stream corridor and the channel corridor, as well as their needs as well at this location. Moving to the northeast from the southwest corridor would be we refer to it as the central corridor. And some of the key and prominent features in this area is really focuses around stormwater management around the Punta Verde natural area, as well as the connection with the West Vine regional outfall channel, which is located north of Vine Drive upstream of Shield Street. It's to provide that connection between Soldier Creek all the way down through this corridor and be able to outfall it in an efficient manner for stormwater. So again, continuing on. Sorry about that. There we go. So north of LaPorte Avenue, again, south of LaPorte Avenue was the Poudre School District campus. Moving north of LaPorte Avenue is proposed to be a series of conveyance channels to manage the stormwater north of LaPorte and take that to the regional detention pond that is proposed at the Punta Verde natural area. There would be a series of crossings with the irrigation ditches, both the New Mercer Ditch and the Larimer County Canal number 2, in order to limit stormwater interception for these ditches, as well as outfalls into a regional detention facility. South of there is south of the Larimer County Canal number 2. We refer to this pond as the Lilac Pond. And the purpose of the Lilac Pond is to collect overflows from the New Mercer Ditch in a controlled manner and be able to convey those through a series of a detention pond and a stormwater outfall into the Punta Verde regional detention ponds. Similarly, another spill location is proposed along the Larimer County Canal as well for similar reasons. So as we get into Punta Verde natural area, we have a series of alternatives that are being considered by the city at this point in time. And these are, I'll flip through those, but in all conditions, we're comparing a series of stormwater detention, stormwater pipes for outfall conditions, and as you'll see through here, various options for an outfall channel that comes from the pond. This is the first scenario that we're looking at, which would be the largest of the ponds, but it would be management of stormwater through a series of 2 regional ponds, both on the, I'll call it the north side and on the east side, an outfall channel to take overflows to Vine Drive, which will ultimately connect through a dual 4x16 box culvert underneath Vine Drive. In this particular scenario, this lessens the stormwater infrastructure need along Vine Drive as well in terms of management of the pipe size coming out of the regional pond, as there is an additional overflow that's being provided. In the next series of slides, you'll see some changes to that. So in this particular case, we're actually going to enlarge the overflow pipe and still maintain an overflow channel making its way to Vine Drive. We still are proposing regional detention in the, I'll call it the southwest corner of this site, southeast corner of this site, and that's in order to address potential flooding that makes its way through the Hannah subdivision as well. That would be the second alternative. And then the third alternative that was reviewed, sorry, that was too quick there. The third alternative is similar to the second alternative, only eliminates an outfall channel that would currently exist on private property in this location. This would rely on a much larger stormwater infrastructure project along the entire length of Vine Drive as well. So each of these alternatives present different levels of effectiveness and feasibility, and that it was compared at a very high level within this master plan study. And I'll turn that over to Mark to kind of talk about those as well as our overall evaluation process.
Thanks, Craig. What's important to know is for each of these alternates, we did meet with all the key stakeholders to review these to see what worked, what didn't, and how can we develop a plan that works for their needs. And this next stage that you see here is what we call the evaluation process. And this is going back to all the interests, the goals identified during our initial charrette phase with the city and county departments. We've identified a series of goals that you see here. They were organized in relation to the city's triple bottom line philosophy on social, environmental, and economic interests that you see with the different colors on the side there. And on the top is a matrix of the different projects and the different alternatives. And an asterisk was placed to see how many of these alternates met the identified goals that were established early on in the process. This helps us to better prepare prioritization and understanding really how valuable these projects are based on those goals. In general, as you see, all the projects and alternatives align substantially with many of the goals identified at the beginning. And there's we want to review with these alternates with you, with the community, with the other stakeholders to make sure that they're supported, that they still function as intended, and we'll advance these as part of the selected stormwater master plan.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, I think we wanted to, this is the stage of the project where we are working on community outreach and giving opportunities to obtain comments on what is being presented in this alternative study. And as Beck and Pete alluded to at the beginning, this information in our full alternatives report can be found on the city's website at this link as well. We also have specific comments, or we have specific contacts, whether you're located within the city or Larimer County, between Beck Anderson at the city, and here's his contact information, as well as Devin Traff, who's with Larimer County as well, and they could be contacted directly here as well. And Beck, I'll just defer back to you, but there's a comment form as well as part of the city's website. Is that correct? That would.
Yeah, you can ask a question directly to the project manager, and we can post those for others to see the answers. That way, we can move through and people can have a common knowledge.
So I think that's all I had for my section. So Pete, we'll definitely turn it back to you.
Okay. Well, at this point, Beck, unless you had anything else, let's open this up. I know people have questions. We've had some great questions coming through. Thanks for your patience as we work to answer those. What I think we do is we start moving through them in order that we've received them. And then also, if people want to voice a question, you can raise your hand. And again, we'll be getting to folks as soon as possible here. But the first question that I have here is from a gentleman named Scott, and he asked, why are the floodplain borders being increased when you've been doing improvements on drainage? Shouldn't that be improving the problem, not making it worse, was his comment and question. And so to our panelists, maybe like to.
Can you guys hear me okay, Pete?
I think it sounds a little bit better than it did before. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I apologize. I don't know what was going on with my computer audio there earlier.
It's still going on, but just project best you can, Beck.
Okay. So there have been some stormwater improvements done within the West Vine Basin, as Craig kind of touched on, over the past years, but there is a significant need for additional projects before all the flood risk can be managed. So, when we go through and you update the hydrology, and you can have flows change based on the updated software, the modeling software, and the technical resources that we have. And then, I think in West Vine Basin overall, we didn't see a huge change in the flows, but there was some areas where it went up, some areas where it went down. So anyways, basically the changes that we're seeing is, number one, from hydrology update, and then number two, when the 2003 floodplains were mapped, they used the best available data at that time, and the information that we have available to us today is so much more precise and accurate than what we had back then, that drives a change in floodplain boundaries. So that's kind of what we're seeing throughout the basin. But like I said, in order to eliminate the flooding issues, the projects have to be implemented in full down the road. Does that kind of answer that one?
Expect. Scott, I'm hoping that gets to the point for you. If not, please let us know, and if you'd like to say something, you're welcome to raise your hand. Okay, we've got another question here. Referencing plans bordering Cherry near Irish for infill development and riparian development. My understanding is that is privately owned property. How does that fit into the plan?
Craig, can you scroll back to that location in the slides?
Yes, I can. Where was that? Sorry, I gotta wait for it to.
Bordering Cherry near Irish.
Okay.
For the infill.
I think this one works. Is that correct, Beck?
Yeah. So I'm thinking that that refers to the land there, location J sanctuary site. Is that correct? So the master plan improvements, the previous master plan identified the same regional flood conveyance channel that is shown in this plan on that site. And so the way that that works is that as the infill development occurs, that we work with the developer to implement the master planned improvements. And so should that area develop in the future, the improvements identified in the master plan would occur as part of that development. Yeah, I think that's all I have on that one.
There was a question to the group about how many of these projects might be implemented in each of these three regions. So a question on implementation.
So as far as implementation goes, the way that these work is that we have, like I had mentioned earlier, there's 13 stormwater basins within the city. So each basin, we complete the master plan and then go through the alternatives analysis and then identify the recommended plan of improvements for each basin. And those projects then get put into our capital projects prioritization, and they get prioritized against projects from all other basins in the city. And so until the recommended plan is finalized and then prioritized and we see where that falls, then we know how far out these improvements are, or how far out until they're built. But what is shown in the recommended plan as a whole would be what the ultimate goal for implementation of the project. So basically what you see in there is what eventually we want to get to.
And Beck, I'm gonna try something different here. Back to the question about related to Cherry. I'm gonna let Barbara talk here, and she can confirm that what she's hearing from you is what she's trying to understand.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yes. So that area privately owned right now. So when you're talking in the future, would that mean if he sold that area that is now the current overflow, for the stormwater, if he sold that, would this be the guidance for the development for that part then? It would have to be just the part near Cherry developed and infilled, and the rest is riparian zone rehab? Is that would that govern what would happen if he sold the property?
That is correct. Once the master plan is adopted by the utilities executive director, then that plan essentially kind of, it drives future, like what the future development on that property could be, essentially. So, it may not look exactly like you see it right here, but this is a vision for it. But yes, so are you referring to the sanctuary site?
To the what?
Are you referring to the sanctuary development site?
No, the part that runs right up to Cherry. Sunset, I live at 420 Sunset, so this is the stormwater area that, that used to have cows on it. It's for overflow water, and the ditch that feeds it runs between my property and my neighbors from Sunset.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering, how this works for the future, because I've talked to the owner of that property. So I know it's privately owned, and sorry about that. And so I'm just trying to see how, when property is owned, how does the city, well, right now it's in the county, how would they govern what is able to happen on that land? Is this because it's the stormwater takes priority over everything else? The plan, if it's adopted?
Well, in cases where we have proposed improvements on private property, we reach out to those property owners on an individual basis and discuss the plan and then solicit feedback for them or from them.
Okay.
And I have reached out to some of the property owners in this area that are impacted, and I'm hoping to sit down with them and have that conversation. But no, it's not, it doesn't work that way where we say, oh, this is what we want to do and this, you got to deal with it. You know, we really try to collaborate and work with the public to determine kind of what the best path forward is for everyone that's impacted or involved.
Okay. Now, also the ditch that feeds that area runs right by my property. So would that continue to be a flow place to the riparian part? Because that's what it would feed into according to this plan.
Yeah, so is it the PB&L ditch?
Probably. I don't know the name of it. It goes from Sunset to that area we're talking about.
Yeah, so
I think it's the open channel, Beck, that currently feeds the Hollywood Irish Pond from the wet.
That's probably it.
Yeah, so that channel would remain in place, and water would outfall from the detention pond into that channel. Now, keep in mind that the water would not, you know, these improvements are what we look at for a 100-year level of protection at this time, and so that detention pond would not see significant flows unless you had a 100-year rainfall runoff event, and so majority of the time that would all be just dry with, you know, just localized rainfall runoff.
Right. Currently it flows to the field from Sunset, and it does have water in it right now. So, I mean, it happens every year when we're in the wetter part of the time. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Okay. Let's see. We've got more questions here. This is just a short question. How many of these projects might be implemented in each of those 3 regions is the question.
Oh, I think we did that one already.
Did Mark, that's the one that Mark,
correct.
Mark referenced. Thank you. And similarly, the 3 Punta Verde alternatives were presented. Are they all under equal consideration, or is this already, or is there already a list of preferred alternatives?
At this time, we're considering all 3 options, and so there won't be a finalized preferred alternative until the recommended plan is developed.
So Beck, one of the questions talked about the current county stormwater assessment fees and how that relates to these improvements. Is that something maybe you could talk about a little bit over time, how that's been collected?
So I can touch on it, but that might be something that I'd prefer to have Devin talk about too. But the way that it works right now is that, so the county residents pay a stormwater fee that's collected, I believe, by the city of Fort Collins. I hope I don't get this wrong, and then that money is then used to implement stormwater improvements throughout the basin. So the residents that are within the city limits pay that fee to the city's fee. Residents within the county pay that fee at the county rate, and it's collected by the city. Is that, I can't see the question, sorry, Craig.
Well, I think the only thing I would add, and I might have this wrong too, but over time that does feed the capital improvement program that would go into this. And that's some of the questions deal with that it takes a while to get the improvements made. And I think basis is the plans need to be updated as more information is known about the hydrology and the flooding conditions in the basin, but those fees are going to fund stormwater improvements long term.
Okay, we've got another question here. Will these flood mitigation plans only help the local neighborhoods, or could we see improvements further east? Specifically, they're thinking about the flooding May 2018 that we saw on College and Riverside in that area.
So the way that this works is it goes back to each drainage basin. And so the drainage basin boundary defines when rainfall falls on the ground, where it all kind of funnels to. So the improvements in the West Line Basin would not have any kind of an impact for flooding that you might see in adjacent basins. That being said, this plan here, and something that Craig touched on, that one of the goals was to disconnect stormwater runoff from the irrigation canals, because currently what happens is that the irrigation canals that transect the basin intercept stormwater and then convey that water at the ditch capacity into the adjacent canal importation basin, and then eventually at certain locations it spills out of the ditch and it can flood properties. And so once these improvements are implemented, it would reduce that potential for stormwater to be conveyed out of the West Line Basin into adjacent basins, and therefore it would positively impact potential flooding in adjacent area or adjacent drainage basins.
As well as best manage the flow that can leave the canal systems as well, which isn't managed at this point in time.
Beck, there's another question. It's kind of similar, related to improvements being recommended. Like, are they putting us more at risk? Did the previous improvements that were done over in the Vine and Shields area put us at more or less risk?
Good question. So any stormwater improvement projects that have been implemented in the basin would not put anyone at more risk for flooding. Those projects all have to go through a map revision process because they're located in the floodplain. And as part of that process, the project wouldn't be approved should it show that it would negatively impact any property or structure within the adjacent area in the basin. And so I think, with these projects implemented, right now, the nature of the flooding in West Vine, because of over time how the irrigation ditches have intercepted stormwater, kind of cutting off the natural Soldier Creek corridor, and then also with development kind of encroaching in on the drainage ways, the nature of the flooding is just, you have these flow paths that are not well defined and that kind of just meander through the basin. And so what these projects do is they capture the flow in those flow paths and consolidate or reduce the footprint of the floodplain, therefore limiting and significantly reducing flooding on private property and to avoid flood damage to structures.
And there's a question here, back in Craig, a couple questions about sanctuary on the green, wanting to know one, the current status, and then two, how do plans for sanctuary affect the work we're trying to achieve with the watershed master plan, the stormwater master plan?
Yeah, so the sanctuary development, last I had heard, was trying to get on the agenda for the planning and zoning board hearing, and I believe that they were trying to get scheduled in the June or at the June meeting. And then as far as how that development kind of interacts with this plan, so like I said before, the previous master plan showed a regional flood control channel on that property, and so when they came in and started to look at developing that master plan improvement was identified, and we've worked with them through their development process to incorporate the master plan improvement into what's proposed out there should it be built. So basically, they've kind of gave us room to have this channel to go through to convey flooding under their proposed developed condition.
There's a question about, a general question about floodplains. There's a person here whose property is in the floodplain, but they've never seen water flowing. And they just are asking, the question is, how can you live in a floodplain and not see water flowing through it?
That's a good question. So what's mapped in the West Vine Basin is the 100-year floodplain, which is consistent with what FEMA regulates and maps. And so, we haven't had a 100-year rainfall event over the West Vine Basin. I believe that in '97, and I wish I had some of my floodplain staff with me here, but in 1997, there was flooding within the basin, and I don't know exactly what the rainfall amount was, whether it was equivalent to a 100-year or in excess of a 100-year. But what that floodplain is showing is what our best approximation of what the 100-year water flow would look like if we got a 100-year event in the basin. So, you could not see water and not have a 100-year event for the whole time you live somewhere or live at a property or throughout your 30-year mortgage, or you could have multiple 100-year storm events within a given year or a series of years. It's just it's our best approximation of what the floodplain would look like in a 100-year event. And another important point to make is that these areas that are mapped in the floodplain are what we have identified as the highest risk areas, but flooding happens outside of the floodplain as well. And so that's just something to take into consideration.
And the influence from the irrigation ditches that are out in this area and how they do influence the floodplain patterns and that exists in here. So the West Vine Basin does, unlike a more normal, I guess, natural riverine conditions, say like the Poudre River, the floodplains don't behave that same way in the West Vine Basin because they're heavily influenced by those irrigation ditch conditions. And so that, as Beck said, the current floodplains are the best estimate as to the flood risk with that under consideration as well. And that's why a lot of it depends on how those irrigation ditches are flowing and how much water is in them at the time of each rainfall event and flood event as well. And those are heavily influenced outside of this basin.
I just wanted to give us a time check. There's several more questions to address, and I'll commit that we will get to you so long as we're able to have your contact information so we can connect you with the people that have some of the answers that you're looking for. And so there's going to be some follow-up here that's going to be necessary. Beck, I'm wondering, to wrap this up, maybe there's a question in the chat about adoption of floodplain and master. It says, will FEMA adopt the new floodplain when the new master plan is adopted? So maybe you could just briefly, because we're at time, share about that process. And from there, the Our City page that we've been referencing, maybe the presentation could go to the slide on the feedback slide with the contact information and the website and everything. But that Our City page we've been referencing is a great place to capture all of your questions. We're going to have a forum set up there so that you can hear from and see what others have had to say. And we're going to communicate back with you and get you the information that you feel like you need. It's impacting you and your property and your neighborhoods. And so I really appreciate everybody being here, and hoping back you could just wrap us up with a little bit of information on how things move forward from from feedback collection and moving forward from there.
Yeah. Let me, regarding your question on the FEMA adoption. So in the city of Fort Collins, we have two types of floodplains. We have FEMA floodplains for Spring Creek, Box Elder Creek, Cooper Slough, Dry Creek, and Poudre River. And then we have city regulated floodplains. And those city regulated floodplains are adopted by the Colorado Water Conservation Board, by the state, but they are not FEMA floodplains. So the big difference there is that there is not a mandatory flood insurance purchase requirement if you're located within a city floodplain. So I just want to be clear on that. If you are in the floodplain, we would recommend that you consider it. You can qualify for a preferred risk policy, which is a lot less money than a standard flood insurance policy. So I would just say that, please take a look at the updated floodplains and reach out to us. If you have any questions or like to talk about anything, we have resources available related to flood proofing and flood safety and resources for obtaining flood insurance. And then as far as the master plan goes, I will make sure that all of these questions that we've got or that we've received tonight are answered. And then I would also encourage you, if you would like to reach out to me directly or to Devin to discuss, then I would be more than happy to sit down on an individual basis and talk through your questions.
Thank you, Beck. And again, I just put in the chat the webpage on where to give more feedback or contact Beck or Devin. And with that, thank you all for being here. And I hope you have a wonderful night.